Hey everybody, welcome to PC Perspective. I'm Ryan Trout, joined by Alan Malventano, and we're here today to talk about hard drives, the latest and greatest in computer technology, spinning disks, no more floppy disks, which were also spinning disks.
Yeah.
No more tape. No more tape drives, no more zip, no more jazz. Today, hard drives. So we're looking at not just any hard drive, though. This is like a super high capacity drive, 8 terabytes.
8 terabytes consumer.
8 terabytes in the enterprise has been a thing for a little bit.
It's been a thing for a while. This is a HE8 HGST drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
it's helium-filled enterprise drive that gives you 8 terabytes capacity. But now we have an 8 terabyte Western Digital drive.
Okay.
That gives you that same capacity. And as you can tell from what's on the screen right here, actually these two, they look kind of similar.
They have the same kind of all-white labeling to them.
Yeah. There's this little, like the angled pieces in the corner here are the same. It's almost as if it's the same housing.
Almost as if.
Almost.
Now, HGST is actually owned by Western Digital now, correct?
They are now, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's something that's kind of been in the process for a while.
It has, because there's something with other countries and like regulations
Sure.
or something, right?
Sure.
They wanted to do that a long time ago, but they had to pace their acquisition and merging of corporate like technical assets and stuff like that.
So what changes in the bump up to 8 terabytes spec-wise? What are we expecting? Throughputs, higher throughput? Does that go up? Do we get reduced latencies? Like, what are you kind of seeing here?
So the throughput is not that big of a change.
Okay. Compared to the 6 terabyte.
Compared to
revs.
the 6 terabyte, yeah. At least not in the specs. When you look at spec sheet, it's only a few megabytes per second faster in the specs. Power consumption seems to scale as you might expect. Like as you get higher capacities, power consumption goes up.
That was
slightly.
interesting. We were talking about that earlier. I didn't realize it. That in general, we're kind of seeing power consumption per gigabyte scaling accordingly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, actually, that spec tends to go like lower power consumption per
the
gigabyte
higher
or
the
terabyte.
capacity.
Yeah,
Okay.
for the higher. In other words, the ratio of power per capacity
Right.
is like still lowering, right?
Gotcha.
Even though the 8 terabyte drive is going to consume more power than the older 6 terabyte. Yeah.
Okay.
And there is the other thing of that HGST was really a big proponent of when they were, when they were trying to sell their helium technology initially, saying, "Oh, it's like such and such percentage lower power consumption, perfect for data centers."
Right.
And they were attributing that to how fast the platters are spinning and that there's air turbulent resistance, stuff like that.
Okay.
Helium's less dense,
Yeah.
so it gives you less heat production, less power consumption, like a bunch
I
of...
would have thought that spinning disks were fairly aerodynamic.
Oh, well, I mean, that's, if you think about it, the disks are spinning. The idle power consumption is pretty much nothing but the motor's effort to spin the disks.
Okay.
Right? And
So I don't know if we pointed it out, but this is the first Western Digital red drive that is helium filled.
It's the first any consumer drive that's helium filled.
Okay. And what is the inherent benefit of that?
So here, it kind of gets a little bit tricky because this is a 5,400 RPM drive.
Okay.
The enterprise drives from HGST were 7,200 RPM.
Mm-hmm.
So air turbulence is like a exponential gain on like resistance. So if you drop the platter speed by 33%, then it gets to the point where that argument is not really that much of a thing.
The benefit
anymore.
of helium versus air.
Yeah, for power consumption is not that big of a difference. Yeah, so that just kind of makes it a bit of a wash on the power consumption thing, as far as
But is there a performance benefit then to having helium? Is there a reliability benefit to having helium?
Well, so the main reason for Western Digital doing helium here is more than likely to give you that 8 terabyte capacity.
Okay.
So probably bumping up against limits with the old tech on what they could do with just regular air floating around the platters.
Okay.
As opposed to higher density technology. It's not only that, but they're merging with HGST. They already have technology that does 8
sharing
terabytes.
tech, right.
They're already sharing tech, so they're gonna, kind of borrow some of the physical design and probably do some of the firmware stuff
Gotcha.
that Western Digital does on the red side. They'll carry that into it, right?
So the red line from Western Digital has always been targeted towards people who are using multi-drives, people who are doing RAID configurations. That still stays the same with the 8 terabyte helium filled. What changes then in like either internals or performance? What stands out about it?
So internals, these.
Obviously, we didn't take them apart.
Well, I didn't take them all the way apart. I did take the PCBs off of the back. Noted that the components are identical between the HE8 and the red 8 terabyte.
Okay.
So same LSI chip driving it, like same kind.
So we're looking at the same platform.
It's basically the same platform. PCBs are nearly identical.
Okay.
Not a lot of changes there. Differences between the old and the new. You could tell there's a difference between, like, there's we have some pictures in the article where there's places where they had to use that HelioSeal technology. There's no vent hole, right? Obviously, the helium would just get out.
Helium would escape in a vent hole.
You have to package these drives differently in order to be able to make that seal that helium does not escape from. Helium's very small atoms, likes to escape from seals, so you have to do like really
like
special.
Balloons.
Yeah, just like balloons, right? You wouldn't want your hard drive to deflate over the period of a month, just like a balloon.
No, that would be bad.
That'd be bad.
That'd be a bad sign.
So those just some physical changes that go along with it. Now, as far as getting into just like read transfer rates, you get about like a 15-20% bump in throughput over the 6 terabyte.
Okay. So like, what's your kind of sequential read speed then?
It starts out at 191 meg per second, and tapers off to 85 at the end of the disk.
Right. So that's. I mean, we're not talking SSD speeds here, everybody.
No.
Like, remember, we're talking about hard drives.
Yeah, but at least we're
good increase.
We're actually getting kind of up there for hard drive speeds.
Yeah.
And that's only a 5400 RPM disk. So if Western Digital later made a Red Pro that was equivalent of that, you'd have over 200 meg per second.
What's the speed on this one? The one to 7200.
The throughputs?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't have that in our chart.
Okay.
But it is faster.
It is faster.
Yeah.
So we would assume that eventually they might make a Red Pro that's something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What we're looking at basically is kind of sort of a 5400 RPM version of the HE8.
Okay.
Right. So there's that. Some of the other benefits that carried over we saw in our file copy test, which does a lot of repetitive copying from the drive to the drive, just in a different location on it. Usually that kind of makes things slow down, but we saw a pretty huge dip. Like this drive is going almost as fast as 7200 RPM drives in some of the workloads, because it seems more optimized. Like some of that enterprise stuff kind of carried over in that test. So that was an interesting point. Anything that has to do with IOs per second scaling, like iometer stuff, this drive is the top performer in 5400 RPM drives. That we tested, right? So
now, is that a matter of the firmware again, or is that a matter more of platter density, or
it's a combination of density, a little bit of firmware in there. It has more cache. It has 128 mega cache versus 64 on the prior models. Right. The interesting stuff we saw is this is the first time we're doing latency percentile testing on hard disks.
Right. Usually we've seen them on SSDs.
We've used that testing on SSDs. When you use it on hard disks, you see some other cool things. For random reads, what I noted is that this drive at the beginning, at low queue depths, very just one transaction at a time sort of thing, right? This drive acts almost identically to the older 6 terabyte model. Okay. But as you climb in the queue depth up to queue depth 32, which is the max for SATA, this drive starts to behave more like the HE8.
Okay.
So,
which is better.
It's actually better, yeah. So it's even if they had the same firmware, somehow this drive is approaching this one and doing so even though it's spinning 33% slower.
Okay.
Which is interesting, right? And so Western Digital doing some kind of tweaks in there to even make it a little bit more enhanced, right? That's for reads. Now for writes, you can't really directly compare to the HE8 because it does this this thing called media cache architecture. It does some kind of special thing where it's able to somehow handle how it's writing to the media in a different way, where it basically gets like almost double the IOs per second.
Unique to this series of drives. It's not used in the Red.
It's unique to the HE8 platform. It's unique to HGST's enterprise drives.
Okay.
So you don't get that benefit. But this, the 8 terabyte Red still pulls away from the 6 terabyte in random writes.
Okay.
And you have to look at the chart to see like exactly in what way it does. But basically, it's just giving you more IOs per second performance than the previous model, even though a lot of the other specs are similar and it's still spinning at the same speed. Right. Usually, at a fixed spindle speed and a fixed seek time, which they're basically both the same. Right. Typically, you would see the same kind of performance in random writes. But in this case, we don't. Probably part of it is because, again, you have double the cache. So it's able to buffer more of those reads coming, or those write requests coming in. It's able to, reorganize them as it's writing to the disks a little bit more optimally. Yeah.
So if performance is pretty good on this. What about power draw? You did some measurements on that too?
We did power consumption tests. We did, this is the first time we're actually doing this, so I kind of just went crazy on it. Did idle testing, sequential read and write, random read and write, and standby, like when the drive actually spins down.
Oh, okay.
That's important because if it's in a NAS box that does standby, and especially if you're not using your NAS at your house that much and it's spinning the drives down very often.
Likely.
Yeah, you'd probably want to see that. So we included 2 different styles of results here. One is just like, what's the numbers? Like, what's the watts coming off of the drive, regardless of like not compensating for the capacity. And the other results is like, per terabyte.
So power consumption per terabyte of capacity.
Yep.
Okay.
And so power consumption per terabyte, this is the winner.
Okay.
Like pretty much across the board. Okay. Which is cool, right? Like you want the power consumption to go down as the capacity is going up.
Yeah. And that's I don't know how many of our viewers and readers really are interested in that from their consumer systems necessarily, like a couple of watts here or there. But if you are talking about mass install bases in enterprise and server rooms, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Or if you're like, you want to put these drives in a NAS that's in your home and you're like on solar or something and you're actually like care about how much power draw you have, because this is something that will be on all the time.
Right.
Right. We did note that the idle power draw, or the standby power draw, is higher on these.
Both Helium drives.
Yeah, both Helium drives. It's actually an identical number.
Okay.
So it's the same hardware in an idle state. So makes sense. It's same number. And there actually was only like it worked out to 0.3 watts difference between these two. So there's your difference due to the rotation speed.
Okay.
Right. Faster versus slower.
Sure.
And that's pretty much it for pricing.
Yeah, that's what everybody wants to know in here.
Yeah, so we're not sure exactly what the MSRP is supposed to be right now, but I can tell you that they're on the market for $333 right now. Like while we're recording.
The 8 terabyte red is $333 on Amazon?
On Amazon,
okay.
Yeah. And that comes in at 4 cents per gig.
Okay.
Which is pretty low.
So
when the 6 terabyte red launched, it was 5 cents per gig.
What is it now? Is it?
It's lower than that. It's like right around 4. So if you ratio these two, there's a little bit of a premium on the 8 terabyte red. I mean, it's just hitting the market. So actually, like Newegg has it even higher, like $40 higher or something like that right now. So I think the prices are going to stable out. They should stabilize out to $300 for this model, because there is like the MyBook Pro also launched, and its MSRP is $300. It has this drive in it. So the bare drive. It's
always been confusing.
Yeah, the bare drive should at least match that or potentially go lower. Right.
Right.
So
in which case you're going to drop your cost per gig down a little bit below 4.
Yeah.
3 point whatever.
3.3 something.
Yeah.
3 point something. Yeah.
Per gig. So it's obviously a different world than SSDs when we're talking about cost per gig. Is this just kind of like, hey, if you are trying to fill a NAS to its maximum capacity, and or you're building a system and you want to have, a RAID 10 or whatever it is in your system, or RAID 5 array, and you just want to use the largest drives you can get. Yeah. Is this kind of your new default drive for that?
And just generally with NAS drives, if you're going to build a NAS and you're at that stage where you're about to spend money on hard drives, right? You want to go with the hardest drive you can get. And, if you have a 4-bay NAS, you wouldn't want to necessarily fill all 4 bays right away.
Sure.
Right? So if you can afford to splurge a little bit and get a 4-bay NAS versus a 2-bay, and then you only need 2 of these drives to get your redundancy, and if you only had 8 terabytes or less of stuff, that's a good starting point.
Right.
And then you still have the extra bays there.
Right.
Right.
So if you add a third in, add a fourth in.
So you might spend an extra like $10 per drive or something, when you can figure out the cost per terabyte and all. But in the end, you're not trying to do your next upgrade cycle involving, well, now I have to replace all of my drives that I bought. Like you have to replace, if you bought 6s at first, later you have to replace the 6s with 8s and maybe even buy additional ones. So that's, you just kind of want to go with the higher capacity if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's pretty much the kind of ending conclusion here to that is like this is meant for multi-drive arrays. Like we've recommended this for single drives as well. Even in our VR builds, I've recommended, hey, if you want to go up for the reds, you can. Even if you're just going to buy one now, you can add a second one later if you're on that type of budget.
That's the reason we argue that, right? Is if you started with a green or a black or something like that, well, actually blacks are kind of rated for doing a RAID as well. But like if you were going for more power efficient drives, you might as well go for the red to start with, because when you do add that second drive, you want a RAID enabled drive, and that's what the red is. Right.
So this is called it's just called the Western Digital
8 terabyte
8 terabyte red. So they don't really give any outward indication that it's kind of like this special Helium tech.
No, even their spec sheet.
The label similarities here.
Yeah, their spec sheet for the red line, it just has the 8 terabyte like in the same row as the previous ones. Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, well, we'll have the rest of the review obviously up on pcper.com and benchmarks and pricing and links to all that type of stuff. If you are interested, that's it from us for now, guys. See you next time. Bye.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed this content, consider supporting in-depth technical content by contributing at patreon.com/pcper.